I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
We are Velocities of Music. On this podcast, Tom and I discuss a foundry of topics pertaining to modern music, including artist deep dives and monthly and annual new music wrap-ups. Before we get started, you can help support Velocities of Music. Subscribe to Velocities of Music on your favorite podcasting device to automatically get our latest podcast episodes sent to your device each week. Also, Velocities of Music doesn't want your money. We also don't want to introduce ads into this podcast just yet. Right now, all we want is for you to share Velocities of Music with family or friends whom you think would benefit from joining in on the music discussion Tom and I try to create each podcast episode. Today, it's time for something new for Velocities of Music, an artist interview. We have Joe Vickers from the post-rock band Caspian on the phone with us, and he's been kind enough to agree to let us ask him a few questions about his band and his perspective on music. Hey, Joe. How's it going?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Doing great. Glad to have you on the call.
Dude, I'm super excited to be here.
Well, you ready to get started?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I mean, dude, I don't know, like, because you guys haven't done an interview yet, right? So
No, we haven't. Well, it's kind of funny. So back in our very early days, like 6 years ago, when we were doing strictly album reviews on YouTube, we actually did a couple of interviews. We interviewed a couple of the guys from Fun, and we interviewed Josh and Sarah from Fantagram. But since then, we haven't really done anything like this. So this is the first time we've done it in the more formal podcast format. So we've been really excited.
And to be honest, like back in the day, we wanted to do more interviews, but it just didn't fit the format of what we were doing at the time. And so I feel like this is like your email was perfect timing, because Tom had just brought up to me how like we were trying to expand the type of podcast that we do, and we wanted to expand into doing some artist interviews. So this is like, your timing couldn't have been more impeccable.
And we seriously appreciate your willingness to hop on a call with us. We've been pumped.
Oh, dude, you guys have no idea how much I've been listening to the podcast ever since I found that post-rock deep dive. And that's what possessed me to write the email. I was like, man, these guys, they know what they're talking about. So, like, I mean, I hope they keep doing what they're doing. I hope they're getting the support that they need.
Yeah, we've been doing this 6 years. We've been doing the podcast for 1 year, but like we've been constant, as like our lives have evolved over time. We've been trying to like find a sustainable pace that we can do this and not have it like be like dominate our lives, but it's still like a fun pastime that we can do and kind of scale it. And I feel like we've really found that rhythm. So you can probably relate being in a band.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes you feel like you're just like rolling a snowball like uphill.
Yeah.
I mean, the snowball's kind of getting bigger, but you're still rolling it uphill.
Yeah, I know that exact feeling. That's a really good metaphor for it. So I'd like to kick it off with kind of a boilerplate interview question. I promise they won't all be. We're going to try to make them not all boilerplate. But the question to me is a little bit deeper than just what it is on the surface. So Caspian, what are your influences as a band? And more importantly, I think the underlying question there is, why did you guys decide on post rock?
I mean, to be honest, when Cal, who was a guitarist in the band, approached me to jam with Phil, who's another, he's like the front and center guitarist when he's on stage. He's like, they were like, hey, let's just go jam. And I showed up, and I was playing in a different band at the time, and we were doing some like live kind of techno jammy stuff. Like, we were getting into some weird territory.
Nice. And
I didn't even really know what post rock was. And they were like, yeah, just come jam. And it was funny enough, because we did this with our most recent tour announce. We talked about this. They showed me this album by the Appleseed Cast, and it was Low Level Owl, Volume 1 or 1 and 2 or something like that, and that it just really resonated with all of us at the same time. And we were like, not necessarily influenced, but more inspired. Like, hey, when we jam, we make something that kind of sounds like this. So, like, if these guys can do it, we might as well, like, try to do something. I've always come from, like, I mean, man, my music knowledge it's all over the place and like,
sure.
kind of limited. So, like, when I came up it was, rock, rap, country, classical, jazz, funk, a huge genre, generalized genre names. And I never really got into, I knew the difference between like prog and punk rock, but that's kind of like where it ended. And I was like, oh, post rock. These guys are doing this thing. There's no vocals. It kind of sounds like 60s, 70s prog rock to me, the writing style. It's something that I was into. None of us could sing really well. So it was like, let's start playing, we booked a concert and we were planning on having a singer later on. And then, after we played a show with like most of our instrumental songs, people were like, well, you can get away with doing this. This is awesome. So ever since then, we were just like, oh, whatever. We don't need a singer. We're just kind of like hop into this post-rock genre that we've been like, people are like, oh, you sound like Explosions in the Sky in this post-rock genre. So, all right, we'll take that and run with it, I suppose.
Was that like an immediate decision after that show where you decided, screw it, we don't need a vocalist? Or was it still, did it kind of taper off and for a while you're thinking, well, maybe we should, and then someday, X number of weeks later, you decided you didn't? What was that transition like?
One guy who plays guitar in the band, Aaron, he wrote a bunch of lyrics and was like going to be our lead singer, but nothing really connected. And then it was just like the more songs we wrote, we eventually had a full album worth of songs that didn't have any lyrics. So we went into the studio and recorded that. And, that was You Are the Conductor. It was like, man, it's like 11, 12 years ago now.
That's pretty cool. It sounds like a very natural evolution. Tom and I talk all the time about the vocal test in music. Like when we're listening to an album, we talk about considering the vocals as part of the overall composition. If it passes the vocal test, then the vocals are adding something to the overall composition and the album listening experience. And if it doesn't, we argue that like artists should think about pulling the vocals out. So the fact that you guys kind of identified that and that thought of impossibility of not having vocals that resonated with you and your band at such an early stage is actually pretty cool from our perspective.
Yeah, and I think some of the other guys in the band, they're really similar music. They have a similar musical taste to me, and we've always listened to music for the music part of it. It never really mattered to me what the guys were saying. Back when I was I was like 13, and Nevermind came out. My mom was always really strict with music and was like, you can't listen to this Nirvana. And I was like, I don't even care what this guy's saying. I don't care. I just, I'm listening to the chord changes. Right. I'm listening to the drum beats. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
And for me, lyrics have never really mattered. Yeah, sure, I'll sing along every now and then, to something that is catchy, but that's about it. And I guess I feel the same.
It's like the parents have to assume that you're internalizing the worst parts of the music when really you're just listening to it for other reasons, not to kick back, not to rebel. Like that's not always the case.
Oh, no. I was never listening to music to rebel, to be honest. It was more, it always made me feel good. Like if a piece of music made me feel something, I was always like, this is great. This is just the greatest feeling in the world. I don't want anything else. This is unbelievable. And then the more I started playing music, the more I realized that, how some of the technical music that was out there that was actually in pop music because I would just put a radio next to my drum set and play along with that. Mm-hmm. And some of the technical stuff that was happening in older pop music, now I'm talking about like 70s rock and roll that was popular back then. People were doing odd time signatures, and that was definitely something that resonated with me as a drummer.
So going back though to you were talking about with your early work and the first album, the first EP that you recorded, kind of starting those songs with the thought of vocals in mind for them, but then transitioning out of that. How did that affect your songwriting process when you're thinking about vocals, then you decide not to? I mean, how do you write these expansive instrumental tracks?
There was a time. There's a song on the first EP called "Loft" that actually has a couple like. It follows almost a verse chorus thing for a little while, and then we get to the second half of the song and just kind of rock out. That would have been perfect for lyrics. That was literally the first song we ever wrote, and so that having lyrics in mind at the time. Well, we didn't have lyrics. We just were like, well, maybe we'll sing over this.
Sure.
It kind of went from part A to part B, back to part A to C to B, and then there was like the rock out solo guitar section or something like that, traditional rock kind of format. And then once we sort of realized that the lyrics weren't going to happen, things became more linear. It was like, well, we have part A, we have part B, we have part C, we have part D, E, and F, and we're never going to see part A again, but who cares?
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's just such a complex way of writing music, which is great because that's what I'm into. But so much of the music we hear every day is just in that verse chorus format, and so much of prog rock seems to prog rock, post rock genres in that vein seem to kick against that. It just makes for a much more fluid album listening experience.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Speaking of fluid album listening experience, the 4 albums that you guys have, specifically your last one, Dusk and Disquiet, which came out last year in 2015, really does this. But I've noticed that each of your albums flow exceptionally well from start to finish. What is your guys' process for arranging tracks and structuring your albums in such a way that it gives that fluid, straight-through listening experience?
Well, it's always been like we always try to tell a story with the arc and the flow of the album, and the track listing is just it's this. Phil is like he's like our fearless leader. He labors over the track list for months, and he'll just be like, I got these 3 different track lists that I think kind of work, and it all kind of ties into, wherever our lives are at the time and what stories we're going to tell. So there'll be, some kind of intro, and then maybe some high point, and then we have to decide, okay, where's the low point going to be? Is the song even really a low point because it has this kind of mood, but it's quieter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's more like, we feel our way through it, kind of like, I guess, you could call it like lines of a poem or something, where sometimes a line of a poem, may be so abstract that you're like, well, this came out of left field, and this could honestly be 7 lines down, and it wouldn't even make a difference, but it really has to do with what we're feeling at the exact time. And I think, Dust and Disquiet, some of the tracks were no-brainers. We end with Dust and Disquiet. It's like it's honestly, in our minds, when we were writing it, we were like, we can write a really good post-rock song. We know it, and we're trying to expand our boundaries on this album, but we need that seminal post-rock track.
Right.
And to end with that was just really fitting. And it just always comes back to guiding the listener through a story, whether they make it up on their own, or if it just has to do with things that are going on presently in their lives. It's really just up to their own interpretation.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the closing title track from Dusk and Disquiet, because it's something that Jake and I had observed about Caspian's music in general is that you guys seem to have really strong climactic closing tracks on all of your albums. They always end up, it seems, running the dynamic gamut from soft to loud, being these kind of keystone tracks right at the end to cap it off. And I would definitely say that's true of the newest one.
Yeah. I mean, you always want to end with a bang. Probably, kind of tying it all up with a nice little ribbon at the end. It's at the end of a play, they have every character who was in the play, they come out and sing, and you just kind of incorporate all the various aspects of the album, or the moods, and just throw it all in the kitchen sink into one track.
Yeah, it's the finale concept.
Absolutely.
This question is specifically, for you as the drummer in the band. One thing I observe about post-rock genre in general, and for Caspian, this is certainly the case, is that there's certainly going to be tracks that have these long builds where you really go from 0 all the way up to 10, but it might take you several minutes to get there. I feel like as a drummer, it would take an incredible amount of patience to take you from that starting point to that end point. Is that something that has ever been a struggle, or does that come pretty naturally? How do you deal with those, parts like that where you behind the drum set really are responsible for evolving that dynamic build?
Oh, man, that's an awesome question. I mean, dude, dynamics have always been a thing that I've been super focused on. I think, like I said, I listened to a bunch of prog rock when I was coming up in high school, when I was learning how to play drums.
I just feel like, for those situations, it takes a lot of tact. And I think tact is really the word I want to highlight there, because you hear a lot of drummers, and I've even worked with, some drummers who you feel like they're always trying to think of like, what can I do that'll be fun, rather than what can I do to serve the sound. And I feel like listening to Caspian, you do a great job of balancing that. Where can you add a little flair, but then where do I just need to lead the rest of the band up to this climactic high point?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for guiding me through my answer. That is actually, it's true. You want to start, at a low point to get to the high point. But I mean, I consider myself more of like an energetic player, but I can do low dynamic, I guess, with energy.
Yeah.
And something that I started doing with this band that I had never done before was these long cymbal builds. And it was really a suggestion from, someone at practice who was like, if you could just like smash on the cymbals for a while, we could keep this like melody going, and it became an interesting dynamic that like, I could just like hammer down on the cymbals for a little while, and that became almost its own like beat, even though it wasn't necessarily a beat that drove the song.
Sure.
And over the years, I've definitely, and the whole band together, we've all developed more patience. It's definitely something we struggled with way early on was patience. We always just wanted to like hit to the money shot. And that is something that separated us from a lot of post-rock bands early on, was that like some of our songs didn't really take that long to get to like, to get going. And I've listened to a bunch of post-rock just like trying to figure out like, where we fit and how like, our competition or our buddies are doing. And it's like, some of these songs, they can just drag on for a really, really long time. And then like the end is ridiculous. It's like the most amazing climax ever. But we've never really had the patience to do that. And I think until on like our third full length, when we end the whole album with this song Sycamore that ends with this big drum finale and everything. And it's real slow build. And when we wrote that song, we set out from the beginning to build something and be patient with it. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, as a drummer, I think I just try to do what fits in every song, no matter what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things, speaking of like how you guys have progressed over the course of your discography, that I've noticed just listening through your catalog is that it seems like the production quality goes up a notch on every single record, and each subsequent record it gets better. And I think that has really helped specifically like your role in Caspian's music, as like the drums are so much more clear. You can hear them. You can like the energy just kind of seeps out into the mix more, that you're creating, especially during these longer builds, that you guys are utilizing more of as a songwriting device.
Well, that has everything to do with going out and getting better engineers for sure. At one point we were recording with the same engineer in Boston. We love the guy, and every album kind of had the same similar sound. And then we were doing our thing down in South by Southwest, and Matt Bayless approached us and said, "Hey, I really enjoy what you guys are doing, and I'd like to, record you guys." We were like, "Whoa, holy crap, Matt Bayless, yes, of course." So then he recorded and helped us produce Waking Season. And it was like night and day from our old, methods. This was a professional we were working with that he just had worked on so many albums, and the sound he played traffic cop, which is something we desperately needed. It's like sound traffic cop, where he was like, okay, this sound now, and this sound goes down, this sound up, and this is something that we never had before. And so it really comes down to the mixing, to be honest.
Yeah, because I would say with Waking Season, that's probably, I would say the most significant jump in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. Tom and I, as you were talking, like, we're both nodding our heads, like, yeah, the pieces are starting to fit together in our minds.
Yeah, it's funny when you start to uncover. I mean, I know you guys do a ton of homework, but if you're getting some of the info from the direct source. This isn't stuff that you hear in every interview, which is awesome. So
right.
It's not something you can just like read online.
Yeah, which is great to us.
Perfect.
Yeah. So kind of coming back to that production and also circling back to your role in the band, I notice around Tertia that you start to incorporate some more electronic elements into the drums and the percussive elements. And I think that plays even a more prominent role on the last two LPs. I'm really curious, how is that for you as a drummer, trying to incorporate those elements into the sound when maybe you're so used to a more acoustic drum performance style?
It's an awesome question. And I can answer that one immediately, because with Halls of the Summer on Waking Season, I know we were talking about Tertia, but it brought to mind that trying to write that song was really hard for me, because it was the first time that we had tried to layer like a full electronic beat. Like I really was at one point was like, I don't even need to play over this. Like maybe I should do something else. Maybe I should like pick up a glockenspiel or something, And then it was like, well, you could play some. Well, I started playing around with playing around the rhythm that was already happening, and then later in the song I joined with it, and it was such an impactful moment that it was like, I see now, I see where like electronic beats can fit into our writing style. We can use it. I mean, it's not necessarily, I have a hard time like trying not to step on whatever beat, because normally it's an appropriate beat for whatever is happening, and I don't want to like just either mirror it or make whatever's happening sound too complex. But it really is, it's trying to look at, I guess I kind of look at it like as if I had another human drummer in there, and if I was trying to make something work with the second drummer in the band. Other than that, if it's not a full electronic beat, that's easy. Little glitches and little hi-hat taps or something that we have electronically programmed. I mean, that's easy to play around with. That stuff's all staccato, and you can just do something big and open over that, and it just sounds awesome all the time.
So it's not as much like, you wake up one morning and say, hey, I want to incorporate some electronic drums into this. It's more, once you realize that maybe the weapons in your arsenal, so to speak, that you're used to using won't quite serve the sound in the way that you want it to, you start looking elsewhere, and that's how you expand your palette.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny that, we were talking about other interviews and things you can read online, or at least I mentioned that, because everybody asks us stuff about, how you come up with this and how you come up with that, and it's all just, it's kind of organic, I guess, the way that it comes about.
Yeah.
Back when we started doing podcasts very early on, Tom and I did a podcast on what makes a concert great. In part of that podcast, we discussed the importance of the venue. But it's gonna I'm interested from your perspective as a performer in a band. What are your favorite venues or places to perform?
Well, we have our local favorites. We have the Sinclair in Boston, which is just it's a newer room and it's just so sick. Then the bigger venue in Boston is the Royale. And that's just a very nice, ballroom kind of venue. This tour that we did most recently, where we went around with Under Oath, we played the most ridiculous venues. The venues were just huge, and they were all theaters and ballrooms. We played, I think it was called the Aztec Theater, and I think it might have been in San Antonio, and it was like walking into old Mayan culture on the inside. And the decor on the inside was just really crazy.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And so for us to play in a venue like that, we know that the crowd's going to be pumped up already. the venue's so sick that it's just going to be like, well, this is going to be an amazing show right off the bat. I mean, I'll play almost any club as long as there's people there to watch, but there's definitely venues that are nicer than others and venues that have, nicer backstages and cleaner bathrooms.
Right. Clean bathrooms are a must, I think, in a good venue. For me personally. I don't know about you.
It's hard to achieve, hard to find a venue that has that.
Right. And now you mentioned the crowd. How big of an impact does the crowd have when you're playing?
100%, 100 million%. I mean, it's everything.
So you want us to be in the audience cheering you on? You want us to be loud and vocal about how much we love Caspian?
I mean, I was at a mono show a really long time ago, and there was a really annoying dude just yelling, "We love you, we love you," the whole
right.
time.
Yeah. So you don't want to be that guy.
Really that cool. Yeah. You don't want that, but it definitely varies by culture. But we do appreciate when people are rocking out, and if there's a group of people who happen to be moshing at one of our shows, which is untraditional, we welcome it. It's dope. It's cool, but. Yeah. That doesn't traditionally happen, and we recognize that in places like Germany where, when we play, people just kind of like be stroking their chin and standing with their arms crossed, but they're really enjoying it at the same time. So you kind of have to get used to stuff across cultures, whereas like one of the most wild times we had was in China. And people were calling for an encore, but our set was way over, and we were just like, oh, man, it was like 25 minutes. People wouldn't leave, and they were going bananas, and screaming and shouting.
Awesome.
And we came out and played a song, and it was like the Beatles coming off of the plane in like 1965 in America or whatever. And when we came back out on the stage, it was one of the most amazing things for our band. But we don't get that all the time, and especially being a post-rock band, you just get a lot of people who kind of nod their head along, people who are following the intricate rhythms, or people who are just kind of like getting in their own head or thinking about something that's like super personal and important to them in that moment, that we, help them achieve some kind of like epic thought at that time, and so we can also recognize that that's happening, but
yeah, I can certainly relate to that.
Jumping around.
I can certainly relate to that side of things.
Yeah. So story here. Jake and I, back in I think like 2011, we went and saw Explosions in the Sky at a venue here in Des Moines, Iowa, called the Valair Ballroom. And it wasn't really a huge crowd. I mean, Jake, I don't know what you'd say, maybe a couple hundred people.
At most.
Seriously. Pretty small crowd. And what was really pissing me off is I was standing kind of near the back of that small crowd, and during the quiet moments of Explosion's set, people were just talking, and I could hear talking over what they were trying to do, which was build a beautiful moment, Have you run into issues with that as well, on the flip side of that kind of enthusiasm you saw in China, where maybe there's people who are doing things like that are distracting from the experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes with the territory of their sheer size, like Explosions in the Sky. I know you said there wasn't that many people there, but like it's a popularity thing. Like you get a different crowd who's going to be like they show up and they're there to drink and have a good time and party. And I can totally respect that. That's totally the time and place to like go and have a good time and party is at a rock show, but the post-rock genre is kind of like a little different in that respect. We're not Metallica. Yeah. We're not trying to get people pumped up, or, I'm not like Dimebag Darrell running around, spraying beer on the crowd.
Yeah.
That's not really something that happens. But we get a little bit of that at our bigger shows, because like maybe we're more popular in like a bigger city like Berlin or something. And so, someone says, hey, I'm going to this show. They have a few friends who don't really know that much about it, who, maybe they don't dig some of our quieter parts because they're just there to rock out and have a good time. And they might talk over it. But the funny thing is you got diehard fans who just shush them the whole time. And they're just like, shh. It's so funny. And like, I'll have my head down a lot during the quieter moments when I'm not playing, but I'll still smile, and like look up and see who's putting their finger over their mouth and shushing everybody and be like, I'll go talk to that guy after.
Yeah.
Be like, yeah,
Good when you have the fans to fight the fight while you're being busy trying to rock out.
And I mean, look, I'm up there working. I don't care if people want to have a conversation. We're not going to glare angrily at people who are
Sure.
talking, but it is funny. We do recognize that they're going to do it.
So you mentioned a couple times now playing in Europe and Asia. How do you find that, largely not having vocals and subsequently lyrics in Caspian's music, have you found that that's affected the way that people in those maybe non-English speaking cultures receive you and your band's music?
Well, I think ultimately if someone writes a great song, everybody is going to listen to it and like it no matter what language it's in. But it was very noticeable right away in Europe that the audiences were much bigger, and I think it's they're gonna appreciate something that has a little bit more art to it. Maybe not singing hooks all the time, and it's stuff that they don't have to worry that they're not going to sing along with it. But I don't think they necessarily go into it with that mentality when they come to our shows. Like I've never been to a show in Germany, like a Pearl Jam show, but I'm sure they all know the lyrics. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
And to be honest, there's a lot of Europeans who speak English. So I guess I could bring it over to China, where people don't care. We're making music and it's fun, and they're yelling. But if we were singing, they'd probably just be kind of waving their arms or something.
Sure.
I have some friends who live over there, and honestly, the English-speaking bands, they're bigger than the Chinese bands. I don't know why. Maybe it's like the Western culture aspect of it. Could be. But yeah, I mean, it hasn't really mattered, and it's been a slower climb in the U.S. because I think post-rock is just something that's it's taken a longer time to pick up momentum over here.
So on that note, on Dusk and Disquiet, your new record that we've mentioned a couple times, we hear vocals play a more prominent role, really for the first time in your music. How did that come about? How does that affect the creative process for you guys?
To write music with vocals, I had a hand in the songs, but I didn't write any lyrics or vocals at all. But the thing is, we did have something to say this time around. We have it kind of exhausted. You mentioned all the weapons in the arsenal,
mm-hmm.
and we had kind of gotten to a point where it's like we've done a lot. We've got a lot of material here, and we've kind of done, a lot of these dynamics, and there's a dynamic that we haven't done yet, and it actually is perfect timing because we're all going through. I mean, our bass player, he died in 2013, and we were all just kind of in a weird place after that, and looking to get it out, I think, and that's where all the lyrics on the album they're all about that. So that and writing those wasn't really a challenge. One of them, we had an instrumental song that could stand alone. That was Echo and Abyss. Yeah. And an email came out and got sent out to the band. It was one of the guys. He's like, "Hey, I've got these lyrics. They've been really weighing on me, and I think they'd fit over this song." So we put them in there. One night they like stayed up all night, recording these lyrics and putting them over the recording of the song we had. And they sent out that email out to two of the guys, and we all heard it. We were like, yes, this is perfect. This makes so much sense. And everything had finally come together for that song. And then there was a light acoustic track. And a lot of the guys, including me, we listened to Mark Kozlik. He's, kind of like a general favorite in the band. And he's written a lot of just these like emotional acoustic songs. Mm-hmm. And ever since the inception of the band, the guys and I wanted to do something like that, but it never really fit into like the mood of any of the albums. We've introduced acoustic guitar before because it's always just been like a mainstay in all of our lives. It's like any acoustic guitar music, but we hadn't had just an acoustic song with lyrics. And then so we had the Cal, who wrote the song, with just his guitar, his voice, sent it out. And we, put a little bit of kind of like a Radiohead inspired, growing drone underneath the whole thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then just that came together really just easily, so that was a sign okay, this belongs on the record. We don't know where yet. Are we going to end the album with this? That could be, a crazy thing, but it ended up residing in the middle of the album because that was where the arc was. We needed to bring it down right after Echo and Abyss. It was weird. I didn't want to have the two lyric songs next to each other, but in the end it made sense.
I was actually going to comment on how perfect I think that ended up as the centerpiece, and not only as the centerpiece of the album, but as Echo and Abyss going into Run Dry. I actually think that it warms you up for the vocals being a little bit louder in the mix by the time you get to Run Dry. It doesn't feel as out of the blue, and those tracks work really well together.
Right, and I'm always thinking about that cohesive listening experience, and it really, having it at the center of the record really, I think, made that thesis statement.
That put really well. That's I think that was part of the discussion when we were trying to come up with track listing for sure.
We got to ask you a few questions now, kind of based on some of the topics we've been discussing on more recent podcasts. Our recent podcast we did was about the effect of music essentially being free today in 2016 for the listening experience.
I listened to that one.
Yeah,
it was really good, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So,
and I mean, I'll let you ask your question, but I identified with a certain part of that where you were talking about how if music wasn't free, a lot of people wouldn't have an opportunity to listen to some of the music that's out there. And I mean, that's absolutely true for us. We wouldn't even be where we were if our music wasn't readily available online a long time ago.
Especially considering you started, Caspian formed around 2004. That's quite the journey over the last 11 or 12 years, being that, I remember how things were in 2004. And of course, people were downloading music that had been around for a few years and it was starting to get more popular. But, the streaming services weren't really there to the extent that they are now. People couldn't really download to the extent that they could maybe a handful of years after that. But I'm curious as to how you've seen that technological advancement grow as you have grown as a band, and how those have kind of paralleled or maybe conflicted.
Well, I mean, the first thing I can think of is that eventually eventually a band will grow and then not need a record label and be able to self-release and be online and grow themselves. They'll need promotions and stuff like that, but if you're going to make any money online, you don't want to share it with the record label. But anyway, it was funny you mentioned back in 2004 how it was definitely the wild, wild west. Everybody was pirating everything, including all of us. We're not ashamed. And in 2007, I got a phone call and it was like, our album leaked, dude, and we were all excited. We're like, this is great. People are file sharing our stuff. This is amazing. For us, it was super exciting. Now, if that happened with Dusk and Disquiet, we'd be pissed. That would, that would be like the other side of the coin. It'd be like, a record leak. Oh my God. But I think that comes with the territory. There was, it was barely anyone listening back then. So we were just super pumped that anyone was listening. And now it's really has evolved into a business. And I'm a business owner and I pay taxes on my Schedule K and my business and stuff. And so now it's like, oh, well, that'd be a bummer. But I also recognize that we're still growing. There's still a gajillion people out there who, if they heard our music, they might like it. So I'm fine with it being on Spotify. That's great. I'm fine with people sharing it on YouTube. That's great. I'm fine with people sharing our live show on YouTube. That's great. I don't care. That's awesome. If people want to check us out live on YouTube before they come see the show, it's even better for them. Maybe they don't want to spend the money and come see us after they see how we are live. Who knows? Yeah,
that's an interesting perspective. So another podcast that we did recently back in June, we did a podcast on the post-rock genre as a whole, a deep dive into the post-rock genre. In that podcast, we talked about, we at the end of the podcast, we were alluding to post-metal being kind of a spin-off genre from post-rock. Now you guys, Caspian rocks the hell out at times. I mean, you guys get pretty visceral on some, especially some of your heavier tracks, the longer, more extended, building climactic tracks. How do you guys identify yourself? Are you guys, do you guys see yourself as like purely post rock? How does that separation work in your guys' brains?
We identify with. We were certainly friends and played tons of shows with post metal bands. Absolutely. We can cross over into that genre. I could see that. Sure. More so, I think that like fans of that genre can appreciate us.
Right.
And I mean, we're always saying, and most post rock bands are like, well, we hate post rock. We don't like that label. But, I guess you got to call it something. To me, it's always just been prog rock. I got to say, I'm in a prog rock band. I mean, to be honest, if I'm going to be completely honest, I am in a prog rock band. We write progressive rock songs. Sometimes we sing now. That's pretty much it. But, post anything, people people need genre names, to identify themselves with whatever genre. And I definitely appreciate post metal, and I appreciate what it's doing right now. And I also appreciate the fact that we can play awesome post metal shows, and people love it. And that's when we see people mosh, when people get into it at those shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People are there to like get pumped. It's pretty cool. I don't know if I'd call Under Oath post metal. I think they're like, I don't even know what to call them. I guess they're post emo or post emo hardcore. Who knows?
Post something.
It's post something, right? So it's become like a thing within their genre to listen to post rock and post metal. And I don't know where that came from, but I don't know. I guess that means that like the post rock and post metal genres are doing something cool. I know, post metal people, there's actually a vocalist, right? So
right.
People are going to be able to latch onto that a lot quicker. Without a vocalist, I think a lot of post metal bands sort of sound like what we've been able to do in the past, and what Russian Circles does.
Right.
I mean, they don't sing, but they're certainly more post metal than post rock. I would say if my baseline for post rock is like, the Samuel Jackson 5 or something. I don't know. Some band from like a long time ago that
sure
used to get tossed around in the same conversations as our band.
Your statement about how you guys are an alternative, or you guys play prog rock, like you're in a prog rock band and it's about the music, right? That I know resonates really well with Tom and I. Tom, I can't remember how many countless debates we've had about how, putting music into boxes, and especially artists into boxes, and expecting them to perform within, those constructs just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Right. But it's as frustrating as it is necessary, because we end up, we do podcast, our whole goal is to try to communicate with a larger group of people and an audience, and it's much faster to use those monikers than it is to just describe everything from scratch about a band or a song every single time and recreate the wheel. So I feel like it's something that's as frustrating as it is necessary.
Yeah. And I mean, if you got a band, then you're going to have to be like, I am in blank kind of band, I suppose. Anybody that asks. And, when you go to play a show, you don't want to be the only post-metal band on a country bill.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That would be a weird show.
So our next question, pretty straightforward from that one. Where do you see the post-rock genre going? In that post-rock podcast that we did, we really saw, we tried to give a chronological history of like the inception of the early days of post-rock, and talk about how the genre kind of evolved over the next, decade and a half to 2 decades. Where are we going from here?
You're going to see more. I'm sure you're going to see more singing. I'm sure you're going to see more electronics. You'll see more genre bleed. Maybe
Sure.
You'll see a post-rock band that borrows from reggae. Who knows?
Yeah.
And I think the best thing about being in a post-rock band is the fact that we can do whatever we want.
Yep.
We can play a country song. We could literally have like a alt country song on our album, and as long as we put like some haunting keys on top of it and made it weird, like it fit. Fit in post rock.
Will you please do that? I would enjoy that.
I'll bring it up on the next writing meeting. We got some touring to do, and we got we'll go through holiday, and then we'll probably start writing again.
One listener to our post rock podcast left us a comment saying that their guess was that post rock was going to start incorporating more chamber music and strings and things like that. And I was actually thinking about that when I was listening to Dusk and Disquiet earlier, because near the beginning of the album, you do have some of those string elements as well. And so that just kind of seemed to come together in my mind.
Actually, yeah, you're probably right. I got a friend who plays trumpet out in Scotland. He played on Dusk and Disquiet, and I'm already thinking, well, it'd be greater to have more horns.
Yeah.
It'd be great to have like a saxophone section somehow. That's really astute of that person, whoever that was.
Yeah, we learn a lot from our listeners, let me tell you.
Happen.
We really do. So I got to ask, do you have any big plans for Caspian Day this year?
Caspian Day. Well, we'll be on tour. I don't have the itinerary in front of me, but we'll be somewhere. We'll be on tour with the Appleseed Cast, which is, just playing a show with them on Caspian Day would be amazing. Like I said, they were our inspiration back in the day, and now we get to take them out on the road and spend, 30 days with them or whatnot. So every day of that tour is going to be incredible. I'm sure that, our social media will post something, or, people will be like, happy Caspian Day.
Wherever you are, you'll be celebrating.
Something online.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That blew us away. It's funny that you brought up Caspian Day, the hometown of Beverly. They surprised us, and it was one of my greatest achievements, I got to say.
Yeah,
right.
It's a really cool honor to have. Not a lot of people have that.
No, and it's because Beverly is it's a college kind of town, and it's got an art college right in it, and they're really trying to bring the arts to Beverly, and so we are like harbingers of the arts in Beverly as well. So like not only do we have our day, but like we're recognized as like for bringing fresh new art to Beverly, which is more of an accomplishment, honestly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So you do have a pretty grueling tour schedule. You just finished up a tour back in the spring. You're about to hit the road within the next few weeks here, going all over the place, over to Europe, coming back to North America, it looks like. In fact, it looks like the closest to Central Iowa you're going to come is Omaha on November 11th. So you will probably see me and Jake in the crowd there. That's pretty much a guarantee.
Dude, yeah, we got to chat when you come up. How far away is that for you guys?
We'll find you.
It's about 2.5 hours from where we live.
Yeah, it's not so bad. And it's on a Friday night, too, so it's like, why not?
Oh, right on. Yeah, definitely. For sure. Come say hello, and I want to introduce you to like the rest of the band, too, for sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And Jake, wait, I have a question for Jake. Did you start your record collection yet?
I have not purchased my first record, but I am eyeing several key records, and Caspian may or may not be on that list.
You know that Caspian records, man, they're a hot commodity. All these different variants you have with collectors.
Start him off with that. That'll be like his gateway drug into the world of the deep, dark world of record collecting.
I would love that.
Oh, dude, we'd be honored.
So with the tour schedules, and you have this short break in the summer. Well, I don't know. To me, it seems like a short break. It's several months, but still, with the extensive tours that you're doing. What do you do between these tours to prepare for the next one? What do you do to make them different?
We always want to, expand the production a little bit. This last touring cycle around, like when we're doing the first load of Dusk and Disquiet tours, we expanded our light setup, right? So we had these amp lights that we built, and we brought a light designer on the road with us, and that really added a lot to the music. The things that we added before this last Under Oath tour were like that we added a huge banner, right? So like I think it's just about like little tweaks to the production that's going to just make a little bit bigger of an impact. And I mean, to be honest, in between tours, I like to get as much downtime in as possible because there's no downtime on tour.
Right.
I have a wife, so I like to spend time with her. I think earlier I was trying to answer a question. I like trailed off. It's because I saw her. And she was like, oh, hey, you know, and so I was like, oh, I lost my train of thought, guys. I'm sorry. But yeah, you know, I like just spend time with her. And I mean, dude, I'm excited to do this on tour too, but ever since that Pokémon Go came out, I'm just obsessed. I've been crazy playing that Pokémon Go game.
This is Jake's department. I'll pass it over to him for that.
Both my wife and I play, and I have a full-time job, and we have a kid. We have another kid on the way, so just trying to find the time to play. Like I can totally relate, but yet we somehow figure out a way to fit it into our lives.
Adult life getting in the way of Pokemon Go. It's a tragedy.
Adulting.
Jake.
It's adulting, really.
I know, it really stinks. But it's been really easy because I live in a town that has like just Pokestops like all over the place, and at work I sit at a desk that has a Pokestop like on it. So it's just been. I was like, oh, I don't want to get addicted to this game, but I totally am. I don't care.
Yeah, you got to just drop a lure on that thing.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because like the desk I sit at is at a mall, so there's a lure on it all the time.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's so awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm jealous.
Are you guys super rural? Is it hard to like catch anything out there?
Ames has a number of I played Ingress, the game that Pokemon Go is built on before, and so now I've switched over and I've been playing Pokemon Go a lot. And so Ames has a number of places to play. It's not too rural, but like outside of town, yeah, there's nothing, right? And unfortunately,
I feel for those guys.
Yeah, and unfortunately, where Tom and I work, like we have in our front pavilion, there's a statue, and that's a Pokestop, but we can't hit it from inside the building. You have to actually walk out, and there's glass windows, and then all the cool people who work there, they make fun of you. Yeah, it's the worst.
Oh man!
Yeah,
I honestly didn't know that. I don't really feel sorry for you. I think it's kind of funny. But
yeah, you would be one of the cool kids making fun of me for playing Pokemon Go, right?
I'd jump at any opportunity to make fun of you, Jake.
That's fair. So. I would do that. I would do the same. Joe, that's all the prepared questions that we have. I just want to say thank you so much for reaching out to us about the podcast and then being willing to put up with us asking you some questions for an hour here.
Oh yeah,
this has actually been very rewarding for me because like so much of the stuff that you said resonated with Tom and I. Like I can't count the number of times I've looked over to Tom and like we just start nodding because it seems like we're on the same wavelength about like our understanding of how you guys write your music and then just your general philosophy that kind of guides your writing process. It just makes so much sense to us.
I'm glad to give you an insight to it, man. That's awesome. Hearing you guys talk about music, and honestly, I listened to the podcast about how you write, Tom, and I was like, yep, and I was nodding my head during that.
Oh, thanks.
And I listened to the genre bias. You're gonna have to excuse me for being a fanboy for just a second, but I did listen to the genre bias one as well. And I shout out to Tom because, dude, our music tastes are exact. It's like
nice.
right down to the only music I don't like is like pop country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, then I have to take the opportunity to ask you where you stand on the everlasting Jake and Tom Radiohead's In Rainbows debate. Is it like masterpiece level to you, or are you more on my side where it's like, okay, but not one of the better Radiohead albums?
Yeah, dude, I'm meh on that. I'm sorry. It's just me, honestly.
Joe,
but
my man, what's going on here?
So, Jake, you win the Pokemon Go battle today. Yeah. I win the In Rainbows battle.
I gotta be honest, I'd rather win the In Rainbows battle, but it's okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Dude, honestly, Radiohead is collectively our band's favorite band,
nice.
like by far. And I mean that album crushes, most other albums. But as far as Radiohead album, I mean it's not my favorite. But look, it's a great album.
Yeah,
it's just not my favorite.
Yeah, we hear you.
I'm with you. Well, it feels like silly, but very flattering, to me that you would consider yourself a fanboy of us because we certainly are to Caspian. So, once again, really appreciate you taking the time not only to listen to our podcast, but also to come on, be a part of the show, hopefully kick off what will become a larger series of artist interviews. It's really a podcast type that we want to do more in the future, and to have you on here as the the flagship for that series is just terrific, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it's totally an honor for me, guys. Definitely come say hi at any show you come to, and we'll get you that record, Jake.
Cool, I appreciate it.
And maybe by then we can actually have a Pokemon Go battle too.
Yeah. I would hope so. I would hope that they introduce battling and trades.
Wait, what team are you on?
Oh, this is like the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm kind of ashamed of this because I kind of feel like I wanted to pick Instinct, but I picked Mystic. I'm Team Mystic.
Oof. Oh, well, I'm a Valor anyway, so either of those teams I would have been saying, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot.
Look, Mystic is great, and Instinct stinks. That's Well, I get along with the blue team. They're fine.
Instinct is in their name, so they can't help it.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
wow,
the reason
it's just right in there.
The reason why I kind of regret being Mystic is there's a lot of Mystic players and names, and I would kind of like to be the underdog, but you don't really get that information when you choose your teams. Like they're just like, oh, here, pick one. I was like, well. I like blue, so I'm going to pick blue. Blue was the first Pokemon game I ever played.
Oh, nice. My avatar was wearing a red track jacket. So
Nice.
That's why I'm red.
Nice.
That was it. Thanks so much for the opportunity, guys. This has been great.
Yep.
Sure.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, for everyone listening, please be sure to go out and check out Caspian's touring schedule. They're going a ton of places later this summer and fall as well. And if they're coming to a city near you, definitely recommend checking them out. Check out their music on Spotify. Go buy a record if you're a record collector. Great band to be listening to.
Thank you guys for your continued support and participation with Velocities of Music. Tom and I love all of your comments on our YouTube videos, Facebook messages, and your emails. Your participation is what makes Velocities of Music possible, so as always, thank you for being awesome. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
We are Velocities in Music, moving music discussion forward.